face of a lion. What does that mean? Well, there's a couple things it means. For one thing, they symbolize different kingdoms on earth. For example, obviously the human kingdom. Then you have the eagle. That's the kingdom of the birds of the air. Then you have the ox. That's the kingdom of domesticated animals. And you have the lion. That's the kingdom of wild animals. What's left? Reptiles and fish, which a lot of times in biblical lore you will see the two kind of intermingled. What I believe is that Lucifer was originally the fifth cherub who covered, and he was the cherub of the reptile kingdom, just like the others were the cherubim of the other kingdoms. And that's why after he fell, he took a serpent and somehow possessed it so the serpent could speak and talk to Eve and tempt her. Is because he had that natural affinity with the serpent kingdom. Some people actually teach that if you believe in this, I don't know, this is one of those things Christians argue about. We love to argue about stuff, don't we? Anyway, the idea of the pre-Adamic creation. Some people believe that Lucifer was given a throne and a kingdom before man came on the earth. And that's why in Isaiah 14, what does he say there? He says, I will lift up my throne and ascend to the heights. He already had a throne. He was the king of the earth. And some people believe that his kingdom was a race of intelligent reptilians, which we now see as dinosaur fossils. Just something to think about. I'm not saying that's gospel or anything, but it is, because a lot of people who, are trying to fight the whole evolution thing, Christians get themselves all tied up in a knot with the whole dinosaur thing. Were there dinosaurs? Weren't there dinosaurs? I heard this one sweet Christian lady say, oh, well, Satan just put all those bones there to confuse us. There really weren't dinosaurs. The earth is really only 6,000 years old. And I believe the earth is only 6,000 years old, but I'm not sure I believe that. Because there may have been stuff going on before that. Because it is interesting, and I don't know what you folks believe or are taught about this, but it does say there in Genesis, he commands Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. How can you replenish something that first hasn't been plenished, if you'll pardon my fracturing the English language? The other interesting thing is that same word, both in English and Hebrew, is used to Noah after the flood. Yahweh says to him, go and replenish the earth. The other thing is that you'll notice in Genesis 1, what does it say? It says the earth was without form and void. The Hebrew there is tohu bohu. But it says Yahweh makes everything good. Why would he make an earth that's like this big glop of formless nothingness? Unless Satan ruined it, or unless there was a previous flood that is only alluded to in the Bible. And it is alluded to in the Bible, in the book of 2 Peter. Ever notice that? It talks about there, he's talking about how people are scoffers. They say that things have been as the world was from the beginning. And then there's this one very strange passage that people forget, that when the earth was in the water and out of the water and in the water. So it sounds like the earth got baptized twice. Once to get rid of Satan's kingdom, and once to get rid of the Nephilim in Genesis 6. Just some interesting suggestions. So anyway, my point is that if that's the case, then Satan, or Lucifer as he was known, actually his real name is Hallel, which means bright, shining one. That was the name in the Hebrew. But Lucifer, when he fell, he took the reptilian kingdom with him, and that's part of the reason why there's such a kind of about serpents. I mean, most people don't like lizards and snakes and crocodiles, aside from the fact that they eat you. But I mean, other than that, I mean, it's just most people. I mean, I'll tell you, we used to have several pet snakes when we were witches, and in fact, we had a 6.5-foot boa constrictor. And I'll never forget one time, not one of the best nights of our life. It was right after we'd just done an equinox ritual. in Milwaukee, and some nutball from the cult of Guru Maharaji threw a firebomb into our temple. Hey, you try having a firebomb thrown in your temple, you know. It was pretty, we were sitting around after the feast, kind of talking and having some wine and just socializing, and all of a sudden, boom, you know, because it was up in the attic, you see. And anyhow, of course, the first thing Sharon did was go and get her pet snake. You know, that's what you do. You get the living things out first, and then you take care of your property. And it was so funny because she still had on this long black robe from the ritual. And, of course, you know how fire is, all the neighborhood people gather around. And she comes down, you know, she has long black hair, and she comes down the stairs with this giant snake wrapped around. And I'm wearing a scarlet robe because that's what the high priest wears. And we had this one fellow who was in our covenant. I felt so sorry for him. He was a fairly I think he was a doctor. And he was so freaked out by that, he never came back. Just that, you know, that had happened. And, you know, I think he was afraid that someone might find out he was a witch, you know. So anyway, I mean, snakes are amazing animals. But I really don't want to be around them anymore. Anyway. So, the other part about these four beings is this. They're associated with the four brightest stars in the heavens, these four cherubim, and also the four corners of the zodiac. Some of you may know this. The four signs, I think they're the cardinal signs of the zodiac: Aquarius, the man; Taurus, the ox; Leo, the lion; and the Scorpio is the eagle. Now, I'm not saying that astrology is true, but how many of you realize there is a true biblical way of looking at astrology? Not like, oh, you know, who am I going to marry, and it's some kind of weird predictive thing or whatever. But the gospel is in the stars. And here's how it breaks down if you're interested. The man-faced cherub goes with Fomalhaut in the council in Aquarius. The lion-faced cherub goes with Regulus, which is the constellation of Leo. The serpent-faced cherub goes with Antares in Ophiuchus, who is the serpent or eagle. And finally, the ox-faced cherub goes with Aldebaran in the constellation of Taurus, who is, of course, the bull. Okay. What's interesting is that all of these stars are regarded as gateways. Now, I know some people teach that stars are angels, and that might also be true. But in the occult and in the world of UFOs, these are actually regarded as gateways into other dimensions. So Aldebaran, for example, is a gateway into the realm of Taurus, and so on and so on. You get the idea. So these are actually things you can target. And so, like, for example, when I was a witch, I would astrally project, and I would actually go into these constellations and use them as ways to get through various paths to do various magical things. Then we get to the next thing. There's these various other high-level celestial beings. Thrones. Some people think thrones are the same as cherubim. Principalities, powers, world rulers. The Greek word that's used in Ephesians 6:12 is archons. And these are all very high-level beings. I personally believe and I think this is a fairly common teaching among people who are into this sort of thing, that these are beings that are over cities and that are over nation states. That America has a archon, a principality or a power over itself, as do all nations. Also, I believe that major religions have principalities over them. You know, Mormonism, Buddhism, whatever. That they all have angels, either good or bad, over them. And obviously, if they're a false religion, then it's got to be a bad angel or a bad archon or whatever you want to call it. Just like the nation of Israel has Michael. He's the great prince of the people of Israel. And he is their defender. Of course, what does Michael mean in Hebrew? Who is like God. Because that was the battle cry. See, when Satan rebelled, when Lucifer rebelled in heaven, and he says, I will take my throne, I will be like the Most High, El Elyon in the Hebrew. I will ascend. Well, what happened? It says that the dragon and his angels fought, and Michael and his angels fought, and the dragon was cast out of heaven. And so it was like Michael's very name was saying, who could be compared to our God, our El, our Elohim, Michael? Who dares to say they are like Yahweh? That's basically what his name means. And it should be our battle cry as well. An interesting side note about the Archangel Michael. He's regarded in Anglican and Catholic circles as the patron saint of exorcists and of people who deal with the devil and who fight the devil. And there's a prayer which I had to learn as a little child. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Notice here we're praying to an angel. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be thou our defense against the snares of the devil. You know, may thou rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, thrust him into hell with Satan and all the other evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Now, I said that to say this. If you go over to England, there's a very interesting church that's dedicated to St. Michael. And it's in Glastonbury. Have you ever heard of Glastonbury? It's this little town in western England where it's alleged that the Holy Grail was, where Arthur was buried, and it's also alleged that Joseph of Arimathea came there with 12 disciples of Yeshua and set up the first above-ground Christian church in history, a little wattle church. And it's alleged that he put his stake in the ground and that it blossomed. And to this day, that's called the Glastonbury Thorn Rose. Anyway, there's this place called Glastonbury Tor. Now, a tor is an old Gaelic word. It means like a hillside, and it looks artificial. It's this very high hill. It goes up like this, and it slopes down. And it was a place of pagan worship. So you know what they did? A few centuries later, when the Roman Church came in, they decided to build a St. Michael church on top of this tor, which was the holiest place in all England, according to the pagans. And anyhow, they built it and they dedicated it to St. Michael. And on the first Michaelmas, which is the Feast of St. Michael, that's what they call it over in England, after that church was built, the tor experienced an earthquake. And it flattened the entire church except for one part, the tower. And that tower still stands to this day. Now think about that when you realize what a tower symbolizes. It's a symbol of the phallic God. So it's sort of like, you know, even though the Catholics were trying to invoke St. Michael and all these other angels. See, you don't need to mess with angels. Go to the top. Deal with the Almighty. Don't deal with middle-level management when you can reach the CEO. Amen? But anyway, when we went over there, it was really interesting because we drove around and we could see this naked hill with this one single tower on it dedicated to Michael. So anyway, this is the Celestial Council. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, it's important to understand this in the light of all this stuff about UFOs and the B'nai Elohim. There's the riddle of Psalm 82. I know a lot of Christians have wrestled with that psalm over the years. For example, it says in Psalm 82, this is verse 1, God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. Now look at this. I mean, it says right in the Ten Commandments, I am Yahweh the Elohim,